Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about it in context to M. Night Shyamalan's 2023 film, A Knock at the Cabin. There are spoilers for A Knock at the Cabin in this content. All right, so I just saw the film, and it was a brilliant film. I really liked it. I thought it was excellent. It made a lot of good choices in what it showed and what it didn't show. It wasn't really a slasher flick. It wasn't even really a horror flick. I would say that it was a thriller, okay? And M. Night Shyamalan is, first of all, this guy lives in my backyard. Like, he's right here from Philadelphia, and he insists on making films in Philadelphia. And what's interesting is he's able to make that insisting request, and the way that he makes that insistent request is the third. What was his film? It was the film with Bruce Willis, where the kid says, "I see dead people." Sixth Sense. It's the Sixth Sense, right? And that was a huge hit. It really made his career, and he's been able to make movies ever since, right? And he's made a movie ever since that film. He makes a movie at least every 2 years, right? And one of the things that's kind of cool is he has built enough, and he has the model down. He can always get funding for his movies because his movies make money. Period. End of sentence. You could debate whether he's a good or bad director. Yeah, have fun. Who cares, right? Like, but the reality is, what you can't debate is he delivers, right? He really delivers. And what does he deliver, right? He really delivers. He makes a movie for maybe $50 to $75 million, and it's going to make 100, 200, maybe 500 million, right? And so his movies are profitable, right? So let's talk about what happens in A Knock at the Cabin, and let's talk about it in context to Dungeons and Dragons. So A Knock at the Cabin is a brilliant film. It's a very simple film. It's for people who had shared visions of the end times. Now, I'm an evangelical Christian, so I'm going to drop some knowledge on you, drop a little language on you. The study of the end times is called eschatology, okay? Now, these people weren't doing eschatology. They were all granted visions that showed the end of humanity, and they were all very clearly told by a supernatural being that you will coordinate a decision given to a family, and you will be supernaturally told where the family is, and you will tell this family that they will execute one of their own their own members of their family, or all of humanity will die. And basically, the film then, and then these four people, Leonard, Sabrina, Adrian, and Redmond, all go to this cabin where this family is vacationing. The family is Andrew and Eric, and their daughter is Gwen. Okay, and Andrew and Eric are both, I would say, white male Americans. Right, and they have adopted a daughter, I'm pretty sure, from an Asian nation, okay? All right, and actually, it's kind of interesting. They even showed this in the film, that it's very common for Christian families to do this. It's very common for Christian families often to, well, it used to be. I'm not sure if this is the case anymore. And I'm an evangelical Christian. We saw a lot of this, where Christian families will go and adopt children from Asian nations. It's actually, and the reason why is, well, there's a whole lot of reasons why, but it definitely happens. And so these two gentlemen kind of followed the same path, and they presented themselves as though they were as though they were connected to that very common Christian adoption model, right? Kind of interesting, because I definitely saw quite a few of these situations, right? Quite a few of these situations, all right? All right, so this family, Andrew, Eric, and Gwen, right? they're a family. These 4 people just come up to them in the woods, break into their cabin while they're on vacation, and say, you guys have to choose one of you to die, and we're going to ask you again and again and again. And every no you give us, a plague is going to hit the earth, right? And then, of course, Andrew and Eric say, no, you guys are, suffering from delusion. This isn't real. And they give them lots of no's. And every time they give them a no, they simply turn on the television and let them watch the plagues that they promised would come happen, right? Now, what's really interesting about this film is the film does the same thing Dungeons & Dragons does. We're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons in a minute, but it really does the exact same thing that Dungeons & Dragons does, in that it takes away any doubt. So you and me, right? I'm an evangelical Christian. You're lost, okay? You don't believe in God. You don't believe in Jesus, right? And so I know this is a supernatural world, but I can't prove it to you. I know it because, one, I gave my life to Jesus, and I'm incredibly fortunate. And when I gave my life to Jesus, then my life with Jesus began. And I can tell you right now, the Garibay family, we have been so incredibly blessed by Jesus Christ. I'm a very intense, adamant person, and I have struggles through life, and we have 4 kids, right? So me and my wife have kind of walked through this life, and we have seen so many frequent answers to prayer. We have seen so many transitions of people whose lives were absolutely horrible, and through prayer and the grace of God, their lives were improved, right? So for us, this is no longer a question. We know we are in a supernatural world because we pray every week and we get answers to prayer. For us, it's not even a question. For you, right? You are dead. You are dead in your sins, right? And you don't see a supernatural world. You just see you see a natural world, right? And you desperately need to tell yourself that there is no God, because if I'm right and you're wrong, I spend eternity in heaven, you spend eternity in the hot place, right? So you're actually a lot more motivated to not believe in God, right? Because you desperately need to not believe in God. If God's real, you got a huge problem, right? Whereas if you're right, right, and we all just turn to dust when we go away, I don't have a problem. You do, right? So what's really fascinating is M. Night Shyamalan removes all doubt. He's like, this is a supernatural world, and he shows very clearly that everything these 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, these people who represent the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, are saying to this family is true, and that they must sacrifice one person to save the entire earth. If they don't, they will get to walk the world alone, and everyone and all 7 billion people on the planet die, right? So at the end, and the thing that's really interesting about this is M. Night Shyamalan proves, with the film itself, with the narrative of the film, that there's no question. It is a supernatural world. There's a supernatural being, and this is the structure that supernatural being chose, right? And that on a pattern, basically, people, a family, every increment, we are not told what the increment is in the film, a family is made to make this choice. And so far, all families have chosen to surrender one member of their family, and humanity is allowed another age, another period that they can live through. And that's exactly what happens here. So Andrew and Eric are both fathers to Gwen. Andrew is a godless man, and he doesn't believe, and of course he's heartless and cruel and more violent than Eric. Eric is a man of faith. He believes that we live in a supernatural world. He believes that sacrifice means something, and he sacrifices himself, and he asks Andrew to kill him, and Andrew kills him, and Eric saves all of humanity. Very interesting. Now, where does this connect to Dungeons & Dragons? What's interesting is M. Night Shyamalan had a question about the nature of the world. Is the world fundamentally supernatural, or is it natural, right? Dungeons and Dragons had the same question, and Gary Gygax answered it. He said the world is fundamentally supernatural, and all peoples in all realms, okay, doesn't matter what realm it is, right? Didn't matter if it was Forgotten Realms, didn't matter if it was the realm of Dungeons and Dragons, didn't matter if it was Greyhawk, didn't matter if it was Mystara. There was never any question, okay? The question was always answered. What was the answer, right? Well, I'm going to tell you what the answer was. The answer was that, the answer was essentially that God, all of the player characters know there are gods, know that is a supernatural world, and know that it is not a natural world. As we have gone forward in Dungeons and Dragons, there was like some very half-hearted attempts to say if your character wants to deny God, they can do that. But then every other player character was offered saying, yeah, if you want to get your spells from your divine God, yeah, they're right there, right? Like, so we don't know what those guys are doing over there, but we just kind of threw that in the game so that they can pretend that gods aren't real. But every edition of Dungeons and Dragons, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I'll bet you a dungrun to a donut that it's going to be in 6th edition as well, right? The gods are there, right? So this is really interesting because you and I have this disagreement, right? And so I'm like, hey, this is a supernatural world. I don't know what you're talking about. And you're like, nah, man, you ain't got no proof of that. It's a natural world, right? But let's not get it twisted. You need to understand very clearly, when it comes to your non-player characters, they don't play that noise. They don't play that game, right? It is very fundamental, very simple, okay? For every Dungeons & Dragons player character and for every non-player character, it is a supernatural world, okay? And so let's be clear. The lesson of Dungeons & Dragons is that we live in a supernatural world, okay? And I think that it is holding up a mirror to our world and saying, yeah, fundamentally, this is a supernatural world, right? Now, why? Okay, so one, I think that's important to recognize, right? Is if we go to Dungeons & Dragons for answers to questions, right? What does it say, right? And I do think that Dungeons & Dragons is a powerful secular mirror that we hold up to the world, right? And it shows us things about the world. It's meant to do that, right? It's, in my humble opinion, it's meant to be an IRL abstraction engine. That's what it was built for, in my humble opinion. All right. Now, so Dungeons & Dragons says it's a supernatural world. Why? Right? Well, for one, I don't think it was because at the time Gary Gygax believed in a god. I don't believe he did not have a relationship with Jesus Christ. He was not a Christian. He wasn't a practicing member of any faith when he made Dungeons & Dragons. But I think fundamentally he knew God was real, right? And I definitely think a lot of people get into this situation where they simply know God is real, right? And I think that's very, very interesting, right? I think he fundamentally knew, and so I think he put it in there and I think also he wanted to model all. I think the reason Dungeons & Dragons says that that we live in a supernatural world is because Gary wanted all aspects of the human life to be easily modeled within Dungeons & Dragons, right? And if you look at Dungeons & Dragons, it is a powerful IRL abstraction engine, with abstraction modeling tool, and we can model anything, literally anything in life through Dungeons & Dragons very, very easily. And if you had removed that, right, and you had said, hey, there's no supernatural here, the vast majority of people would not be able to connect and use the game, right? A perfect example of this is Monty Cook Games. He is absolutely an atheist or an agnostic. It is so clear in every game he makes that he fundamentally believes in a natural world, and his games simply don't resonate, right? And that's one of the reasons why they've never done well, right? And get this, right? Why does Monty Cook Games fail? It's not because Monty Cook is a worse designer than Mike Mearls was, right? Mike Mearls, in fact, I actually think I read all through the Cypher book. I read through Numenera. It came out on Numenera, and then they turned it into the Cypher system. I read through it, and it was really brilliant, right? It was a very good book, and I very much enjoyed it. But one of the things you could see is it's broken, right? It's not really a good IRL abstraction model, and the reason why is we are emotional, intellectual, and spiritual beings, right? And if it wasn't established that Dungeons & Dragons world has spiritual beings, then it would only be accessible to atheists and agnostics, right? Where atheists and agnostics can certainly put themselves into a world where they don't believe the gods are real. That's literally their life. So that is why it was put into Dungeons & Dragons. M. Night Shyamalan's film, A Knock at the Cabin, was absolutely fantastic. I really liked it. I feel he committed to the line of this, to the narrative, right? Because if it had been some kind of trick and it wasn't real and there wasn't really a calamitous decision to make, the movie wouldn't have had any weight. But it did have weight, and it was quite excellent. Also, there was a moment in the film that M. Night Shyamalan chose not to show, which I thought was an extremely wise decision, right? And it is interesting now, as we move forward in society, saying, okay, how do we proceed forward, and what are we going to agree on? This is material for everyone, right? Very, very interesting film. I really enjoyed it. I really think it really brings up a lot of questions on spirituality as represented within Dungeons & Dragons. And those are the analogies, those are the arcs that I think fit. Every single word you just said is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.